Hi friends! Saturn often gets a bad rap in astrology, but I want to invite you into a deeper conversation about Saturn and the wisdom that becomes available when you work with it consciously, and especially around and through the lens of the father wound. In astrology, Saturn isn't just about discipline and hard lessons. It reflects how we learn authority, confidence, safety, and self-trust, often through the relationship with our father or through his absence. In this series, I'm breaking down how the father wound shows up through each zodiac sign. Not to blame, but to bring clarity and compassion and healing. If you've ever struggled with confidence or boundaries or visibility or feeling safe being fully yourself, this work might be for you. Before we go sign by sign, I want to just share the heart of this work I'm doing. In astrology, Saturn is often associated with the father, but more deeply, it represents the inner authority we build within ourselves, how we learn to feel safe, how we develop confidence, how we pursue our callings or our relationships or our sense of purpose. For many of us, the relationship we had with our father, or the one we didn't have, left an imprint that we carry still into adulthood, and often unconsciously. This series is about understanding that imprint without blame, and also honoring how it once protected you, and gently exploring how it might still be shaping your self-worth, or inhibiting you or limiting your boundaries, and also limiting your ability to step fully into who you're becoming. Since my own father passed a few years ago, I've been really researching how the father wound shows up archetypally in our lives through the natal chart. When this work resonated deeply for me, I decided to go further, explore the patterns across the entire chart, and reflecting on how they played out in my life, both to validate the astrology and to support my own healing after his loss. And as I explored whether this approach could support others too, I wove these insights into the 6-step framework that looks at the entire chart, not just the one placement, to understand your unique Saturn story and how healing might best unfold for you. Because everyone has a unique story and healing looks different for everyone. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering who you are and who you are meant to become. And just to be clear, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration, not a literal judgment of any one father. I'm not here as the authority. I'm here to help you reconnect with your authority, so you can heal and grow and live your life with more confidence, clarity, and purpose. And if you're feeling ready to dive in with guided support, I offer a private session. It's called Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session. I'd love to support your journey here or one-on-one. You can find the offer on nurturingastrology.com, my website. And thanks for being here, and all the best on your healing journey. Hi friends, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration, not a literal judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Pisces, this may be one of the ways the father wound has shaped your confidence, your boundaries, and your sense of inner authority. Archetypally, Saturn in Pisces often reflects what I call the absent father. Not always physically absent, but emotionally, energetically, or spiritually unavailable maybe. This might look like a father who was sensitive, overwhelmed, or lost. Maybe he was ill or addicted, or simply unable to fully anchor into the role of authority. This doesn't mean your father was bad. It means this may be how authority was experienced. As a child, the imprint can sound like, I have to feel my way through life alone, or structure isn't safe, I have to rely on my intuition, empathy, or hope. As adults, this can show up as confusion around boundaries, difficulty trusting your own authority, overgiving, rescuing, or self-sacrificing, or feeling spiritually capable but unsure how to ground that into the world. There's often deep compassion here too, and also deep exhaustion. And this is where I want to be really clear about my work. Saturn alone doesn't hold all the answers. That's why I don't read this placement in isolation. I look at the entire chart through my 6-step framework to understand the full story of how your Saturn wound formed and how it shaped your sense of safety and security and self-trust, and what approaches to healing are actually aligned for you, because healing doesn't look the same for everyone. But Saturn is never just about the wound. It's about the wisdom. For Saturn in Pisces, the healing invitation is emotional clarity without losing yourself. It's learning that boundaries don't block love, they protect your sensitivity. This is the work Saturn asks us to do, so we can build authority that's compassionate and grounded and truly our own. If this resonates, your chart holds the deeper story. I offer a one-on-one Saturn session to help you explore this in a gentle, practical way. And if this stirred something, you're welcome to share it how it landed for you. I'd love to hear. But you can also work with me one-on-one if you choose to. So stay tuned for more nurturing astrology and Saturn through each sign. Take care, friends. Hi, friends. As always, I'll say this is an archetypal and energetic exploration. It is not a literal judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Aquarius, this may be one of the ways the father wound shaped your sense of belonging, and whether it felt safe to be emotionally close. Archetypally, Saturn in Aquarius reflects the distant father, sometimes also the visionary outsider. This father may have been intellectual, idealistic, unconventional, or focused on the bigger picture or larger world, but emotionally hard to reach. There may have been encouragement to be independent, to be different, and to think for yourself, lots of freedom, but not always the warmth and attunement needed to feel emotionally seen. The child might learn, I belong when I don't need too much. And as an adult, this can show up as feeling different or slightly outside of the group, keeping emotional distance even in close relationships, intellectualizing your feelings instead of expressing them, or a quiet loneliness even when surrounded by people. Connection exists, but it can feel just out of reach. For many people with Saturn in Aquarius, this distance wasn't a choice, it was a strategy. When emotional closeness felt unpredictable or unavailable, learning to stay slightly removed could feel safer than reaching out and being unmet. So independence becomes a form of protection, not because you don't want connection, but because you learn not to rely on it. So a gentle place to begin working with Saturn in Aquarius is to ask yourself, where do I keep myself emotionally at arm's length? And not because I don't care, but because closeness once felt unsafe or unreliable. Saturn here doesn't ask you to become more emotional, only more honest about what you actually need. The healing begins when you realize that belonging doesn't require losing your unique self. You don't have to detach from heart to be safe. Your emotional truth belongs, and your individuality does too. This work isn't about changing who you are. It's about reclaiming emotional presence without losing yourself. If this resonates, I want to know. These videos are just invitations, and your chart holds the deeper story. And if you're ready, I'd love to start supporting you in that exploration. I offer a one-on-one session. It's called Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session, where we explore your full chart and your unique Saturn story. You can find that over on my website, nurturingastrology.com, and please stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn through the signs. Take care, friends. Hi friends, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration, remember, not a literal judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Capricorn, this may be one of the ways the father wound shaped your relationship to responsibility, success, and how safe it feels to rest. It's also important to name that Saturn is at home in Capricorn. This can represent one of the most pure and traditional expressions of Saturn energy, often reflecting a father who strongly embodied structure, authority, duty, or provider roles. Because of this, Saturn in Capricorn can sometimes look like a solid or capable father figure on the surface, and still create a wound depending on your lived experience. As always, the rest of the chart matters. Other placements, aspects, and life circumstances shape how easily or painfully this energy was integrated. So archetypally, Saturn in Capricorn often reflects the authoritarian father. This is the father who may have been strict, demanding, emotionally reserved, or absent because of work, business, or survival was always first. This doesn't mean your father didn't care, but the experience may have been that love is earned, feelings come second, or I have to grow up fast. As adults, this can show up as chronic over-responsibility, difficulty resting or receiving support, tying self-worth to achievement, or feeling like you always have to hold it all together. Strength becomes a strategy of survival with Saturn in Capricorn. But Saturn is never just about pressure, it's about earned authority. The healing invitation here is learning that worth is inherent, not conditional, that you don't have to carry everything alone to be respected and successful. This is the work of Saturn in Capricorn. So leadership can come from integrity and not overworking or taking on too much responsibility. If this resonates, I'd love to know. Remember, your whole chart holds the deeper story here. These videos are just an invitation, not the whole picture. And if you're feeling ready to dive in with guided support, I do offer a private session. It's called Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session, where we explore your full chart and your unique Saturn story. You can find that offer on my website, nurturingastrology.com. But stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn through the signs. Take care, friends. Hi friends, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration. It is not a literal translation or judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Sagittarius, this placement often shapes how safe it felt to believe and whether your truth was welcomed or corrected. Archetypally, Saturn in Sagittarius reflects the preacher father, also sometimes called the philosopher king. This father may have held strong beliefs, morals, or convictions, but may have taught lessons about right and wrong, faith, freedom, or success. But emotional presence may have been inconsistent or distant. This doesn't mean wisdom wasn't offered, but belief may have been imposed rather than explored. This child learns there is a right way to think, and I don't want to get it wrong. As adults, this can show up as fear of being wrong or judged for your beliefs, difficulty trusting your inner truth, over-reliance on external teachers or philosophies, swinging between certainty and doubt. There's often a longing for meaning paired with a fear of missteps or getting it wrong. For many people with Saturn in Sagittarius, questioning or exploring outside the accepted path may have felt unsafe. You may have adapted by overvaluing rules or traditions or authority figures while ignoring your own guidance. Sometimes you can feel pulled between following your beliefs and the fear of breaking an invisible code of some sort. A question you might sit with: where have I doubted my own truth in favor of someone else's authority? And what would it be like to test your beliefs gently, without judgment, and see what resonates for your lived experience? Saturn in Sagittarius isn't here to take your faith away. It's here to help you author your own meaning. And the healing begins when you trust your lived experience as a source of wisdom, not just inherited beliefs. Your truth is allowed to evolve, and your inner authority matters as much as any teacher or tradition. This is Saturn's wisdom in Sagittarius. So by just noticing where your beliefs feel inherited versus chosen can open just a small door to feel freedom and more self-trust. Remember, friends, these videos are invitations, not conclusions. So if this resonates, I would love to know. Drop a comment. And remember, your whole chart holds the deeper story. And there are grounded, practical ways to explore that with care. I'd love to work with you. So if you'd like to go deeper, I offer a one-on-one session. It's called Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session, where we will explore your full chart and your unique Saturn story. You can find that offer on my website, nurturingastrology.com, and stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn through the signs. Take care, friends. Hi, friends. Remember, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration, not a literal judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Scorpio, this placement often shapes how safe it felt to trust, and whether closeness felt powerful or dangerous. Archetypally, Saturn in Scorpio reflects the shadow father, sometimes called the power broker. This father may have carried intensity, scarcity, emotional depth, or unspoken struggles around control, fear, or survival. This doesn't mean your father was intentionally harmful, but power may have felt uneven, love may have felt conditional or overwhelming or unpredictable. So this child learns to stay alert, to read the room, and to protect themselves emotionally. As adults, this can show up as difficulty trusting others fully, fear of vulnerability or emotional exposure, hyper-independence or control patterns, intense bonds mixed with fear of betrayal. There's often a sense that closeness requires an armor. For many people with Saturn in Scorpio, this armor didn't come from nowhere. It often formed because emotions felt intense and unpredictable or tied to survival early on, where being open or too open felt risky. You may have learned to stay strong, self-contained, or in control, not because you didn't want connection, but because safety came first. Over time, that protection can turn into isolation, even when the longing for depth and connection is still there. A gentle place to start when working with Saturn in Scorpio is to ask this: where am I protecting myself in ways that once kept me safe, but may now be keeping me distant or alone? And what would it look like to build trust slowly without forcing vulnerability? Saturn here doesn't rush healing. It honors your emotional readiness. And Saturn in Scorpio is not here to keep you guarded forever. It's here to help you build earned trust, but with yourself first. The healing begins when you learn that power doesn't come from control, but from emotional truth and self-honesty. That's the wisdom of Saturn in Scorpio. You're safe to feel, and you are strong enough to heal. Remember, these videos are doorways, not definitions. If this resonates, your chart holds that deeper story, and there are lots of gentle ways to explore it. If you're ready to get into it all, I do offer my private session called Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session, where we will explore your full chart and your unique Saturn story. You can find that offer at my website, nurturingastrology.com, and stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn through the signs. Take care, friends. Hi, friends. Once again, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration. We are not doing a literal judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Libra, this placement often shapes how safe it felt to assert your needs, especially in relationships. Archetypally, Saturn in Libra reflects the fair father, or sometimes what I call the diplomat. This father may have valued harmony and appearances or fairness, and may have avoided conflict or strong emotional expression. This doesn't mean there wasn't love, but it may have felt like peace came when you stayed agreeable, or when you didn't rock the boat, when you considered others first. With this, the child learns connection is safer than self-expression. As adults, this can show up as people-pleasing or conflict avoidance, difficulty making decisions or trusting your own voice, prioritizing others' comfort over your truth or your own comfort, tying self-worth to being liked or chosen. There's often a fear that asserting yourself will cost you connection. For many people with Saturn in Libra, this fear formed early, not because your needs were wrong, but because harmony felt fragile. When peace depended on keeping things smooth, being agreeable and accommodating, or emotionally neutral, that could feel like the safest role to play. So you may have learned to sense others first, to anticipate, adjust, and soften long before you checked in with yourself. Over time, that skill can turn into a pattern where connection feels easier than clarity. A gentle place to begin working with Saturn in Libra is to notice, where am I prioritizing peace at the expense of honesty? And where might I change if my needs were included in the definition of fair? Saturn here isn't asking you to choose yourself over others, only to stop leaving yourself out. Saturn in Libra is here to redefine balance. The healing begins when harmony includes you. And true fairness doesn't require self-abandonment. So this is Saturn's wisdom in Libra. Your needs matter, even in relationship. This work isn't about blaming the past. It's about reclaiming choice, your voice, and your inner authority, one relationship at a time. If this resonates, your chart holds the full story and deeper meaning, and I'd love to support and explore you in it. I offer my private session called Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session, and you can find that offer on my website, nurturingastrology.com. And stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn Through the Signs. Take care, friends. Hi, friends. Once again, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration, not a literal translation or judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Virgo, this placement often shapes how safe it felt to make mistakes and whether love felt connected to being good enough. The child can internalize the message to, I'm loved when I get it right. Archetypally, Saturn in Virgo reflects what I call the perfectionist father, or sometimes also called the judge. This father may have been practical, hardworking, detail-oriented, and deeply invested in doing things the right way. This doesn't mean care wasn't present, but love may have been expressed through correction, fixing, or improvement, rather than reassurance or softness. As adults, this can show up as chronic self-criticism and inner pressure, fear of being flawed, messy, or imperfect, over-functioning, over people-pleasing through service, or difficulty resting and receiving support. There's often a quiet belief that worth must be earned daily. For many people with Saturn in Virgo, this inner pressure didn't come from nowhere. When love, safety, and approval felt tied to doing things right, becoming hyper-aware, self-correcting, and responsible could feel like the way to stay connected. So the inner critic often formed as protection, a way to protect or prevent mistakes before they cost you belonging. The problem is, the voice that once tried to keep you safe can quietly become the one that keeps you tense or unwell. A gentle place to begin working with Saturn in Virgo is to notice, where am I correcting myself before anyone else ever could? Saturn here isn't asking you to lower your standards, only to release the belief that love depends on them. And Saturn in Virgo isn't here to punish you. It's here to teach discernment without shame. The healing begins when care replaces that criticism. This is Saturn's wisdom in Virgo. You are worthy even while learning. Remember, these videos are invitations, not a diagnosis. And if this makes sense, your chart holds the full story. And if you want to dive deeper into it all with a guided session, I do offer that. It's called Break the Mold, Build the Self, a father wound to wisdom session. And we can explore your full chart and your unique Saturn story. You can find that offer on my website, nurturingastrology.com. Stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn through the signs. Take care, friends. Hi, friends. As always, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration, not a literal judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Leo, this placement often speaks to how limiting it felt to be yourself, and whether love felt tied to being seen or praised or approved of. Archetypally, Saturn in Leo reflects what I call the proud father. This father may have been charismatic, strong-willed, or achievement-oriented, someone who valued confidence, talent, or success. This doesn't mean love wasn't present, but it may have felt like attention and love came when you performed, or you shined, or you made someone proud. This message can quietly become, I'm lovable when I'm impressive. As adults, this can show up as tying self-worth to validation or recognition, fear of being seen or fear of being too much, overperforming, or hiding entirely. A deep sensitivity to criticism. There's often a longing to be able to fully express yourself, and maybe even a fear of what might happen if you do. For many people with Saturn in Leo, this fear isn't about ego, it's about safety. When love or attention once felt conditional, being seen can feel just as risky as being invisible. You may notice a push-pull, wanting to shine, and at the same time bracing for judgment. A gentle place to begin working with Saturn in Leo is ask yourself, where do I still look outside myself for permission to be seen? And where might I experiment with offering my expression without needing approval? But Saturn in Leo isn't here to dim your light. It's here to help you build inner authority and confidence over time, and one that doesn't depend on applause. The healing can begin when self-expression becomes something you offer, not something you feel you have to earn. This is Saturn's wisdom in Leo. You get to take up space and shine because you exist. If this resonates, I'd love to know. Tell me in the comments. Your chart holds the deeper story too, and there's a gentle way to explore it. If you're feeling ready to dive in with guided support, I'm here for you. Check out my offer. It's a private session, Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session. We can explore your full chart and your unique Saturn story. You can find that offer over at my website, nurturingastrology.com. Stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn through the signs. Take care, friends. Hi, friends. As always, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration, not a literal judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Cancer, this placement often speaks to emotional security and safety, or the lack of it in early life. Archetypally, Saturn in Cancer reflects the protector father or wounded father. This father may have been loving, but overprotective, overwhelmed, maybe moody or passive-aggressive, emotionally inconsistent, or burdened by their own pain. This doesn't mean your father didn't nurture or take care of you. It may just have been an on-the-job training that felt challenging, which led to you feeling more like a burden than a blessing to the family. As a child, you learned or felt, I need to take care of others, or my feelings are too much. Ultimately, safety becomes hard work, unreliable, or unpredictable. As adults, this can show up as emotional guarding, fear of abandonment, over-nurturing others, or difficulty trusting care will be returned. So home becomes something you manage, not something you rest in. And for many people with Saturn in Cancer, this isn't just emotional, it's nervous system level. So notice how your body responds to closeness or to letting yourself be cared for. A gentle place to begin working with Saturn in Cancer is to ask, when do I feel safest and who am I usually taking care of in those moments? Saturn in Cancer is here to teach emotional self-authority. And the healing begins when you learn to tend to your own inner child without guilt. The work is to create safety internally, not just for others. And this is how Saturn builds real belonging. Remember, these videos are an invitation and not the whole picture. So if this stirred something, I encourage you to explore it. And if this resonates, I'd love to know. And if you're feeling the need to go deeper with guided support, I'm here for you. I offer a private session called Break the Mold, Build the Self. It's a father wound to wisdom astrology session where we explore the full chart and your unique Saturn story. So you can find that over on my website, nurturingastrology.com. Stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn through the signs. Take care, friends. Hi, friends. As always, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration, not a literal judgment or translation of any one father. If you have Saturn in Gemini, this placement often shapes how safe it felt to speak, and whether your thoughts or feelings felt truly heard. Archetypally, Saturn in Gemini reflects the intellectual father, but sometimes called the critic. This father may have valued logic or intelligence or communication, but emotional attunement or connection may have felt inconsistent or unavailable altogether. This doesn't mean conversation wasn't present, but emotions may have been talked around rather than felt. This child learns, I need to be smart or articulate or agreeable to be valued. As adults, this can show up as overthinking your emotions instead of feeling them, difficulty expressing needs with clarity, fear of saying the wrong thing, or feeling misunderstood even when communicating well. There's often a gap between the mind and the heart. For many people with Saturn in Gemini, thinking became a form of safety. Words helped you stay connected, but feelings may have felt confusing or overwhelming or easier to analyze than to feel. You may have learned to explain yourself clearly, adapt your language, or stay mentally engaged while quietly disconnecting from what you were actually feeling. Over time, this can create a sense of being articulate but still unseen. A gentle way to begin working with Saturn in Gemini is to ask yourself, where do I explain my feelings instead of experiencing them? And what would it be like to let a feeling be unfinished without needing the right words right away? Saturn here teaches that presence matters more than precision. And Saturn in Gemini isn't here to silence you. It's here to help you trust your voice, even when it's imperfect or emotionally honest. The healing begins when communication becomes connection, not performance. This is Saturn's wisdom in Gemini. Your truth doesn't need to be polished to be real. This work isn't about fixing yourself either. It's about learning to listen inward and outward with compassion. If this resonates, your chart holds the fuller story, and I'd love to support you and help you learn more about it. I offer a private session, and it's called Break the Mold, Build the Self, a father wound to wisdom astrology session, where we explore your full chart and your unique Saturn story. You can find that offer on my website, nurturingastrology.com. Stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn through the signs. Talk to you soon. Take care, friends. Hi, friends. Remember, this is an archetypal and energetic exploration. Please know this is not a literal judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Taurus, this may connect how safety, money, appearance, and self-worth became intertwined in early life. Archetypally, Saturn in Taurus reflects the provider father. This father often emphasized stability, hard work, and material security, sometimes at the cost of emotional presence. This doesn't mean your father didn't value or love you. Maybe giving things rather than time was his love language. Maybe you felt love needed to be earned in some way. This message isn't always spoken, but it's felt. Be useful, be productive, or security and money matter more than feelings. So as adults, this can show up as tying worth to income and productivity, lack mentality, fear of instability or loss of security, staying in situations that feel safe but are unfulfilling, and difficulty receiving without feeling guilt. So comfort becomes conditional. So notice where tension shows up when you rest, or when you receive, or when you're not actively being productive or producing something. A gentle starting place for working with Saturn in Taurus is to ask yourself, when do I feel most secure? And what do I believe I have to do to deserve that feeling? Saturn here isn't asking you to abandon security. It's asking you to redefine it. This begins when worth is no longer measured by output alone, and the body is allowed to feel safe without earning it. This is how Saturn in Taurus builds true stability, from self-trust, not scarcity. If this is landing for you, you're not broken, you just adapted. And your chart holds the path back to choice. If this does resonate, I want to know. Tell me in the comments. And remember, your whole chart holds the deeper story. These videos are just an invitation, not the whole picture. And if you're feeling ready and want to dive in with guided support, I do offer my private session, Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session. And in that, we're going to explore your full chart and your unique Saturn story. You can find that offer at my website, nurturingastrology.com. Okay, stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and Saturn Through the Signs. Take care, friends. Hi, friends. This is an archetypal and energetic exploration, not a literal judgment of any one father. If you have Saturn in Aries, this placement often shapes how safe it felt to assert yourself, and whether strength felt supported or challenged. Archetypally, Saturn in Aries reflects the warrior father, or sometimes the commander. This father may have been assertive, driven, intense, or emotionally unavailable, valuing strength, action, and independence. This doesn't mean courage wasn't modeled, but softness may not have felt safe. This child learns, I need to be strong, I need to prove myself, I don't get to hesitate. As adults, this can show up as fear of failure or weakness, pressure to always push forward, or difficulty asking for help, or tying worth to action or achievement. There's often strength, but very little rest. You may be a person who shows up with courage and drive, but quietly struggles with permission to pause or to be tender with yourself or slow down. For many people with Saturn in Aries, taking risk or speaking up may feel heavy with responsibility or fear. You may overcompensate with achievement or action or leadership, sometimes at the cost of your own needs. A question to sit with might be, where in my life am I pushing forward out of obligation or fear rather than desire? And what would happen if I allowed myself to lead from curiosity and not pressure? This is where courage meets self-trust and action becomes aligned rather than reactive. But Saturn in Aries isn't here to harden you. It's here to help you redefine strength. The healing begins when courage includes self-trust and leadership includes self-compassion. This is Saturn in Aries wisdom. True authority doesn't need to fight. it stands. You can move forward boldly without having to prove your worth. Okay, remember, these videos are just the beginning, and your chart holds the deeper story, and there are supportive, practical ways to explore and navigate your healing and personal growth. You don't have to do it alone. If you're ready and you want some support, I offer a session. It's called a Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session, where we explore your full chart and your unique Saturn story. You can find that offer at my website, nurturingastrology.com. And stay tuned for more Nurturing Astrology and invitation videos on Saturn through the lens of healing the father wound. Take care, friends. Hi friends, I hope you have enjoyed Saturn through the signs, this series of videos introducing you to the Saturn father wound archetypes. Now, as we close out these 3 years of Saturn in Pisces, it's a powerful moment to pause and reflect on the work we've done and how we've begun to heal the father wound and reclaim our inner authority. Saturn in Pisces has been about emotional clarity and boundaries and tending to the parts of ourselves that needed gentle care. It's been about feeling safe in our hearts even when the past asked us to over-adapt or over-give or overcompensate. If you've been following this series, you've seen how each archetype can show up in your chart and perhaps recognized parts of your own story. And now Saturn will move into Aries on February 13th or 14th, depending on your time zone. This is a bold new beginning, a frontier and journey for the next 29 years. This is about stepping into your authority, your courage, and your individuality. It's about building a new sense of self, one that is confident, self-driven, and aligned with your truth. But here's the thing. Saturn is the planet of time, structure, and slow growth. This work doesn't move fast or happen overnight, and it won't happen without effort. It's not about rushing. It's about redirecting the effort that may have been spent overcompensating or proving yourself, and instead putting it into breaking the mold and building the self. This is your invitation to take what you've learned, to continue exploring your chart, your archetypes, and your patterns, and to start applying them in ways to create real, sustainable confidence and self-trust. Ask yourself, where am I ready to step into my authority? And where can I stop outsourcing my power and start standing in it? Saturn asks us to do the work, but gently, persistently, and with patience. It asks us to honor our past adaptations while consciously building a future where we are fully seen, heard, and empowered. And if you've been doing the healing with me, or if this is resonating for the first time, know that support can make a real difference. If this speaks to you, I'd love to work with you. Check out and book my private session called Break the Mold, Build the Self, a Father Wound to Wisdom astrology session. We will explore your full chart through my 6-step framework and understand your unique Saturn story and the practical, gentle ways you can step into your power as Saturn enters Aries. You can find that offer on nurturingastrology.com. Take your time, be gentle with yourself, reflect, redirect your effort with intention, and remember, the work you do now sets the foundation for decades of empowered, self-trusted living. Take care, friends.